Hanukkah is a Jewish holiday, yet the significance of the celebration has something to teach us all as more learn about the annual Festival of Lights in what feels like a very dark time. But how is the COVID-19 pandemic affecting long held traditions? Dr. Nora Rubel is the Jane and Alan Badkin Professor of Jewish Studies at the University of Rochester, New York. She's an expert in Jewish studies, food, and holidays, co editor of the anthology Religion, Food, and Eating in North America, and the author of Doubting the Devout, the Ultra Orthodox and the Jewish American Imagination. She also has another book in the works. We're so happy, Dr. Rubel, you could join us this morning.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
So it's an 8 day celebration. For those who don't know Judaism, what is Hanukkah and how important is the Festival of Lights in terms of Jewish celebrations?
Well, Hanukkah actually has minor religious significance in Judaism. However, it has large cultural implications. There are two stories we tell about Hanukkah. One is that it celebrates a military victory after the Judaism is outlawed by a Seleucid emperor in 168 BCE. The Second Temple in Jerusalem is desecrated and looted, and Jews are unable to practice their religion. There is a revolt, and 3 years later, after reclaiming the temple, there is a big celebration. Actually, the reason it is 8 days is because the holiday of Sukkot and Simchat Torah, which are normally celebrated at the temple, Jews were unable to celebrate. So they essentially rededicate the temple and celebrate this holiday again, right? So it's a replication of another holiday that they were unable to celebrate several months before. Um, and this becomes the holiday of Hanukkah. However, the story itself is told in books that don't actually make it into the Hebrew canon. So it's not in the Hebrew Bible. The story of Hanukkah is told in the book of Maccabees, which is found in the Apocrypha. And there's a reason that rabbis felt uneasy about including that story. So they actually chose not to have that be included in the Hebrew Bible. And about 500 years later, in the compiling of the Talmud, there was another story that was told, and that's a story that most children are taught, and is kind of the most palatable story, which is this, which also involves the temple, but it's the miracle of the oil. So this is the story that most people know, right? That the oil was only supposed to last for 1 day, but it lasted for 8 days. And so the story is told that when they were rededicating the temple, they only found one vial of oil that was suitable for using in the menorah, which is a six-branched candelabra with one in the middle. So that's seven things. But so you would have, and the one in the middle is called the shamash, or the caretaker, right? It's the one that lights the other candles. But for the miracle of the oil, it lasted 8 days. And so that's why we have what's known as a Chanukiah, which is a menorah that's specific to Hanukkah, because it has 8 candles plus the shamash. So that's the story that was told, because it's a miracle that brings light in dark times, right? And because the story of the military victory is tainted by the heroes of that victory, who go on to become terrible people. It becomes a corrupt dynasty. And so the rabbis are very uncomfortable with that being the point of the story, right? So it's more about the miracles that God intervenes in and creates every day. So one of the blessings, there's 2 blessings. One is that God commands the Jews to kindle the Hanukkah lights. But the second one is praising God for having performed miracles in days of old and today. So it's not specific to Hanukkah. it could happen any day. And actually, one of the things that's being talked about right now is the vaccine for the coronavirus is a contemporary miracle, and that's a thing that we can celebrate during these really dark days.
Well, it is also very much a meal based holiday with a big focus on foods. What specific foods are consumed during Hanukkah, and is preparation of these foods equally significant?
I am so excited to talk about this because actually my house right now kind of smells of Hanukkah, which is essentially the scent of oil. So the most commonly known in North America Hanukkah associated food is the latke, which is a potato pancake. And the significance of the potato pancake, of the latke, has nothing to do with the potato-ness of it. It has to do with its fried nature. So because oil is so significant in the story of Hanukkah, there are different types of foods that are prepared in oil throughout the world that Jews make. So latkes are the most popular in the United States for sure, and I believe also Canada. And that has to do with the large portion of Ashkenazic Jews of Eastern European and descent. But if you go anywhere else in the world, you'll have all these other types of fried foods that are very popular. So you have the Greek loukoumades, which are also these like honey dough puffs, right? Like you have sufganiyot, which essentially are jelly donuts. They became very popular in Israel, and I think in the last like 20 years, all of a sudden, North American Jews were like, we can have donuts at Hanukkah. Like that's a whole nother like level to this holiday, right? So, so that becomes an exciting thing too. But you can really fry anything. But the original latke came from Italy and was originally made with cheese, because there's also a dairy significance to the holiday, which comes from the story of Judith, which she was a widow who plied an enemy general with fried cheese, which therefore made him thirsty. So he drank a lot of wine and became drunk, and therefore the army was able to come in and overtake them. It's a kind of a dark story, and also has a military element to it. But because of that, you get to eat fried cheese, right? So people like that. But the latke becomes more commonly made with potatoes because of the availability of potatoes in Eastern Europe.
So, besides sharing the company of loved ones, is there special significance in gathering together for the sharing of a meal at Hanukkah? And how is the pandemic going to affect that this year?
Well, it's an interesting question because, and it's a question that keeps getting asked about how will this impact, the Jewish celebration of Hanukkah. And I think it's important to note that Jews have been dealing with this since the very beginning of the pandemic. This is actually our last holiday in the year, and it's the easiest to adapt. Passover, which is a major gathering holiday, and Purim, and Sukkot, and the high holidays have all passed. And Passover was in April, right after everything locked down. So we've all become really good at Zoom. Those of us that have the ability to use the internet or electronics on holidays. Hanukkah itself is actually such a home-based practice, and there aren't the same restrictions that that observant Jews have for other holidays, for example. So Hanukkah is not a holiday where people don't go to work or don't go to school. The main event is lighting candles in the evening, and having joyous time with family, right? Playing dreidel or other competitive games. There's giving gifts, but usually this is a very minor thing. This is not a major extended family gathering.
Well, the pandemic hit many ultra Orthodox Jewish communities very hard. Why are these communities being disproportionately affected? And are there increased risks at this time of year?
Well, um, the ultra-Orthodox or Haredi communities were hit very hard in the early part of the pandemic, for the same reasons that a lot of minority communities were, which is high levels of poverty, lack of clear information, which in the United States, at least, there wasn't great guidance from the administration. Um, Most ultra Orthodox Jews live in very small insular communities and live with a lot of people. They have large families in close quarters. And this is kind of all of this leads to susceptibility to the infection. So, and there were a bunch of holidays that led up to this. So, for example, Purim, which is a raucous party based holiday, um, came at the end of March. And there were many, many holidays that, there were many holiday parties, and there was no guidance to not have them at that point. So you had kind of a devastating impact on this community. And afterwards, you actually saw a lot of Haredim donate plasma because they had the antibodies, which was kind of fantastic. However, later on, there became sort of an idea that the Haredim had achieved herd immunity. This isn't for all communities, but some communities really seemed to believe that they had herd immunity, and if they didn't, they wanted to get it. So they felt like everybody's had it, we can gather, it's fine. And of course, they do not have herd immunity, and people continue to get it. So they're at risk. And I think probably unless there is a shift in mask wearing in that community or social distancing, they'll continue to be at risk until the vaccine is widespread.
Dr. Ribel, thank you so much for taking some time today to come and join us on Newspoint 360 to teach us just a little more about a culture that many of us don't know a whole lot about and a celebration that has significance for all of us. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.